start with what we know of how Oscar is currently being presented by the district attorney, because that tells us a lot about the work that we're going to have to do to get justice in this case. So I want you to take out this document that looks like this. We're going to go through different parts of it, and I think as we go through it, it will become clear why it is that we're gathered here today to make sure that there is no cover-up, that the fix is not in, and that we're able to get justice. I want you to turn to page 2 of this document, and I want you to look at lines 4, 5, and 6. It says, this is the document that was written by the prosecutor's office, the people who were supposed to be defending Oscar Grant, the people who were supposed to be representing him over and against the people who killed him. And this is the only positive description of Oscar Grant in the prosecutor's statement. One of these individuals, he's talking about the people who were detained by the police. One of these individuals, later identified as Oscar Grant, voluntarily off-boarded the train and was escorted by Peroni to the location of the detainees. That's what the prosecutor has to offer in portraying Oscar Grant to the court and to the public. Because this is a public document and this is a political case. So how Oscar is presented says a lot to anyone who's looking at this, including a judge and or a jury, about how the prosecutor, the people who are defending Oscar, want to portray him. Now I want you to turn to another document, which begins like this. It's about 4 pages in. And I'm sorry because we need to number these better so that it's easier to read through them. But this document, which is page 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, page 8, back of page 8. It's going to say 1 on it and original on the bottom, page 1 and original, filed on January 28th. Have people found the page? Turn over to page 2 and just look at and compare how Officer Mehserle's attorney portrays him in his first written statement to the court and compare it to the statement that we just read about Oscar Grant. Starting on line 8 of page 2. It says that Mehserle was 27 years old, that he was the oldest of 3 children, that he played basketball, that he went to college, that he suddenly got an interest in becoming a police officer. It said where he went to school. It said that he had applied to 3 different law enforcement officers. I'm going through it quickly, but if you go to line 19, Mr. Mehserle enjoys music and has played the electric and acoustic guitars since age 14. He plays jazz and rock and roll. Go down to line number 23. Mr. Mehserle's parents have always resided and continue to reside in the Bay Area and have served and continue to serve as a great source of ethical guidance, wisdom, and inspiration for their children. Both parents are employed. and it goes on and on and on. Compare that statement to the statement by the prosecutor about Oscar Grant, and ask if there's any kind of justice that we can expect from the prosecutor acting without our building this movement. The prosecutor could have written about Oscar what Officer Mehserle's lawyer wrote about him. You heard it tonight. It's not like the facts weren't there. It's not like the information wasn't available. It's not like the family wasn't available. It's not like they haven't talked to the prosecutor time and time again. It's not like the prosecutor didn't interview the other young men, their parents, their family. They could have portrayed Oscar in this same sympathetic manner. And by not doing that, they've set up Oscar to seem and to be a stereotype. They've set up Oscar to be regarded from the beginning as just one more young black man. Now I'm going to ask you to go to the beginning of this again. And I'm going to ask you to turn to page 2 again. We're back in the prosecutor's statement. So the actual page 2. This is the prosecutor making the case for Oscar Grant. I want you to look down at line 14. We're just going to read this paragraph. At this point, several officers, including Officer Mehserle, arrived on the platform. These additional officers assisted in controlling the detainees and a number of persons who had gotten off the train and were yelling at the police and approaching the detainees' location on the platform. Officer Peroni walked to the lead car and spoke to the train operator to determine if she was aware of the identity of any victims or persons involved in fighting on the train. The train operator said the detainees had caused a disturbance on the train, but she was unable to see any of the actual fighting because the car was so crowded. She said that no one had identified themselves as a victim of battery. She didn't see anything. She says in this statement, she didn't see who was involved in the fight. She couldn't see the fight. She says that no one came forward and said to her, I was just hit by somebody. There's no victim. There's no ability to identify who was involved in the fight, and yet Oscar and 5 other people are being detained. So in other words, if we were presenting this information as advocates for Oscar, like this prosecutor is supposed to be, we would say that 5 young people were hauled off a train, were made to line up against the wall with no evidence that they had done anything. We would be saying that they were falsely arrested and detained from the beginning. Not only that the problems began when Oscar was detained, wrestled down, held with his hands behind his back, but that the problems began when the police, with no information, no proof, no evidence at all to support finding these young men responsible for anything, targeted them, hauled them across the BART station, and lined them up against the wall.